There is a moment in life when something shifts so subtly that you almost doubt it is real, yet deep inside, you know you are no longer the same person you were just days ago. It does not arrive with noise or dramatic change on the outside. Instead, it feels like an internal rearrangement, as if something within you has begun to move into alignment after years of silent resistance. If you are here, reading or listening to this, it is not random. There is a reason your attention was drawn to this exact message at this exact moment, and that reason may be more profound than you are ready to admit. Most people believe transformation must look like instant clarity, confidence, and visible results, but real change rarely announces itself that way. It begins in confusion, in discomfort, in a strange sense of detachment from the life you once accepted as normal. You may feel restless without knowing why. You may feel disconnected from people, habits, or environments that once felt familiar. This is not failure. This is not you losing your direction. This is the first sign that your internal frequency is shifting beyond what your current reality can reflect. What you are experiencing may be what many would call a quantum activation, not in the mystical sense that promises instant miracles, but in a deeper, more grounded way. It is the moment your perception begins to change, your emotional responses begin to reorganize, and your identity starts to detach from patterns that no longer represent who you are becoming. It is subtle, but it is powerful, and once it begins, it does not simply stop. Joe Dispenza often explains that the body becomes addicted to the past, to familiar emotional states, even when those states create suffering. So when you begin to choose a different internal state, your system resists, not because something is wrong, but because something is changing. Bruce Lipton reinforces this idea by showing how your internal environment shapes how you interpret and respond to the external world. When that internal environment begins to shift, your entire reality starts to reorganize, even before you can see it. So if you have been feeling like something is happening beneath the surface, like your old self is dissolving, while your new self has not fully emerged yet, understand this clearly. You are not lost. You are not behind. You are in transition, and this transition may be happening faster than you realize. What most people fail to recognize is that profound change rarely feels empowering in the beginning. It often feels like disorientation, like something familiar has been quietly removed from beneath your feet. The patterns that once guided your decisions no longer feel reliable, and the emotional responses that used to define you begin to lose their intensity, or, in some cases, become even more amplified before they dissolve. This is not a contradiction. It is a sign that something within you is being recalibrated at a deeper level than conscious thought. When a quantum activation begins, it does not immediately translate into visible results. Instead, it starts by disrupting the internal architecture that has been sustaining your current reality. Your mind may still try to operate within old narratives, but your emotional body begins to resist those scripts. You may notice a growing tension between what you used to tolerate and what you can no longer ignore. Situations that once felt acceptable may now feel draining or even intolerable, not because they suddenly changed, but because your internal standard has shifted. This is where many people misunderstand what is happening. They interpret this internal friction as instability, as if something is going wrong. In reality, it is the breakdown of coherence between your old identity and your emerging awareness. You are no longer fully aligned with the version of yourself that was built from past experiences, conditioned beliefs, and repeated emotional patterns. Yet you have not fully stabilized into the new version either. This in-between space can feel uncomfortable, even unsettling, because it lacks the certainty of the familiar. There is also a deeper layer to this process that operates beneath conscious awareness. Your nervous system, which has been trained over time to respond to specific emotional patterns, does not immediately adapt to this new state. It continues to seek what is known, even if what is known is limiting. This is why you may find yourself momentarily pulled back into old reactions, old thoughts, or old emotional loops. It is not a failure of progress. It is the inertia of a system that has not yet fully integrated the shift. At the same time, something else begins to emerge. A subtle sense of awareness that allows you to observe these patterns instead of being completely absorbed by them. You may notice that even when an old reaction arises, there is a part of you that recognizes it, that questions it, that no longer fully identifies with it. This is one of the clearest signs that the activation is already in motion. Awareness is no longer fully fused with conditioning. Another important aspect of this shift is the change in your energetic resonance. While this may sound abstract, it becomes very real in your lived experience. You may feel drawn away from certain environments, conversations, or habits without being able to logically explain why. At the same time, you may feel a subtle pull toward new ideas, new perspectives, or even periods of solitude that previously felt uncomfortable. This is not random. It reflects a reorganization of what your system can now harmonize with. The discomfort you feel is not a signal to return to what was, but an indication that you are no longer compatible with it. Just as a structure under renovation appears chaotic before it becomes functional again, your internal world may feel unstable as it reorganizes. The noise, the uncertainty, the emotional fluctuations are not signs of collapse. They are signs of reconstruction. And perhaps the most challenging part of this stage is the absence of immediate external confirmation. The outside world may still look the same, even as everything inside you is shifting. This delay can create doubt, making you question whether anything is truly happening. But transformation at this level always begins internally. It is not dependent on immediate external validation. It unfolds first in perception, then in response, and only later in visible outcomes. What you are experiencing is not random discomfort. It is the early phase of alignment, a process in which the version of you that was shaped by the past begins to dissolve, creating space for a new configuration of thought, emotion, and identity. And while it may not yet feel stable, it is already moving you in a direction that your previous self could not access. There is a layer of this transformation that remains invisible to most people, not because it is subtle, but because it does not fit into the way they were taught to interpret change. Many assume that growth should feel like certainty, like a clear path unfolding in front of them. But what often happens instead is the exact opposite. The path becomes unclear, the direction feels uncertain, and the internal dialogue becomes louder, more complex, and sometimes even contradictory. This is not a malfunction of the process. It is the mind attempting to reorganize itself in response to a deeper shift that it cannot fully control. At the core of this experience lies a silent conflict between intention and conditioning. On one level, there is a desire for expansion, for a different kind of life, for a reality that feels more aligned, more meaningful. But on another level, there are deeply embedded emotional patterns that were shaped by repetition, by past experiences, and by the need for psychological safety. These patterns do not dissolve simply because a new intention is formed. They continue to operate, often unconsciously, influencing perception, behavior, and emotional reactions in ways that may seem inconsistent with what you consciously want. This is where the illusion of being blocked begins to take shape. It can feel as though something is preventing progress, as though there is an external force delaying what should already be happening. In reality, what is being experienced is a misalignment between the emotional baseline of the body and the direction of conscious thought. The mind may be oriented toward change, but the body is still anchored in familiarity. And familiarity, even when it is uncomfortable, often feels safer than the unknown. This dynamic creates a kind of internal noise that is difficult to articulate. It can appear as restlessness, as subtle anxiety, or as a persistent feeling that something is off, even when nothing specific can be identified. It may also manifest as a tendency to seek distraction, to fill the silence with stimulation, or to search for answers outside rather than sitting with the internal shift that is already unfolding. The more this noise is amplified, the more difficult it becomes to perceive the clarity that exists beneath it. There is also a modern layer to this experience that intensifies the disconnection. The constant exposure to rapid information, comparison, and external validation creates a fragmented attention system. Instead of allowing thoughts and emotions to settle into coherence, the mind is repeatedly pulled in different directions, making it harder to sustain a stable internal state. This fragmentation does not stop the activation, but it can obscure it, making it feel distant or inconsistent. At the same time, there is a deeper intelligence within you that remains unaffected by this noise. It does not operate through urgency or fear, but through subtle signals, through shifts in perception, through moments of quiet recognition. These signals are often overlooked because they do not demand attention. They are not loud, they are not dramatic, but they are precise. They appear in the form of intuitive insights, in the sense that something no longer resonates, or in the quiet knowing that a certain direction is no longer aligned with who you are becoming. One of the most significant aspects of this stage is the gradual realization that not everything that feels urgent is important. Much of what demands your attention is tied to old patterns, to conditioned responses that were once necessary but are no longer relevant. As this awareness grows, there is a natural shift in what you prioritize, in how you respond, and in what you allow to influence your internal state. This does not happen all at once. It unfolds in layers, sometimes with clarity, sometimes with confusion. There may be moments of strong alignment followed by moments of doubt. This fluctuation is not a sign of inconsistency, but of integration. Each layer that surfaces is an opportunity for the system to reorganize itself more completely. And beneath all of this, there is a quiet but undeniable movement. A movement away from automatic reactions and toward conscious presence. A movement away from inherited patterns and toward self-defined experience. It may not always feel stable, and it may not always feel comfortable, but it is moving. And once this movement begins, it gradually reshapes the way you relate to everything, including yourself. At a certain point in this process, the shift stops feeling like something that is happening to you and begins to reveal itself as something that is being generated from within you. This is where the experience deepens, because the focus gradually moves away from external circumstances and toward the internal patterns that have been silently shaping your reality all along. What once seemed like random outcomes or repeated cycles begins to show a structure, a kind of internal logic that connects your emotional habits to the life you experience. There is a pattern beneath every reaction, beneath every repeated situation, beneath every emotional loop that feels difficult to break. These patterns are not accidental. They are reinforced over time through repetition, through the emotional intensity attached to certain experiences, and through the identity that forms around them. When a particular way of feeling becomes familiar, it begins to define what feels normal, even if that normal is limiting. This is how a person can unconsciously recreate the same type of circumstances, not because they want to, but because their internal state is calibrated to recognize and respond to those frequencies. As this activation progresses, that calibration begins to change. What once felt normal starts to feel out of place. Reactions that used to happen automatically begin to slow down, creating a small but significant gap between stimulus and response. In that gap, there is awareness. And in that awareness, there is the possibility of something different. This is one of the most important turning points, because it marks the moment when the old pattern is no longer the only available pathway. The nervous system plays a central role in this transformation. It has been conditioned over time to anticipate certain emotional outcomes, to prepare the body for familiar reactions, and to maintain a sense of predictability. When that predictability is interrupted, the system may respond with discomfort, not because something is wrong, but because something is unfamiliar. This is why change can feel unsettling even when it is positive. The body is not yet accustomed to the new state, and it continues to reference the past as a point of stability. At the same time, there is a gradual weakening of the emotional charge that once sustained certain patterns. Situations that used to trigger strong reactions may begin to lose their intensity. Thoughts that once felt convincing may start to appear repetitive or disconnected from who you are becoming. This does not mean the pattern disappears instantly. It means it is losing its grip. And as it loses that grip, your sense of identity begins to reorganize around something less reactive and more intentional. There is also a subtle but important shift in how you perceive silence. What once may have felt uncomfortable, like a void that needed to be filled, begins to take on a different quality. It becomes a space where clarity can emerge, where thoughts can settle, and where the noise of conditioned responses becomes easier to observe. In this space, there is less urgency to react and more capacity to understand. The absence of constant stimulation allows deeper layers of awareness to surface, layers that were previously obscured by distraction. This internal reorganization does not require force. It unfolds through recognition, through the repeated experience of seeing a pattern without immediately acting on it. Over time, this recognition becomes stronger than the pattern itself. The identity that was once built around automatic reactions begins to loosen, making room for a more flexible, more conscious way of being. As this continues, there is a growing sense that reality is not as fixed as it once appeared. It becomes clear that what you experience is not only influenced by external factors, but also by the way you interpret, respond to, and engage with those factors. This realization does not create instant control over everything, but it introduces a new level of participation. You are no longer only reacting to life. You are, in subtle but meaningful ways, shaping how it unfolds. And this is where the acceleration begins to make sense. It is not that life suddenly changes overnight, but that the internal mechanisms that once slowed change begin to dissolve. The resistance that kept you anchored to familiar patterns weakens, and with that, new possibilities start to become visible. Not because they were never there, but because you are now able to perceive them. As this process continues to unfold, it begins to extend beyond internal awareness and quietly influences the way your life organizes itself in real, tangible ways. What once felt like coincidence starts to feel more intentional, not because events are being controlled, but because your perception is no longer filtered through the same limitations. The way you interpret situations changes, and with that, the meaning you assign to them also shifts. This subtle change in meaning has a profound impact on the direction your life begins to take. There is a noticeable difference in how you relate to time. Before, there may have been a constant sense of urgency, a pressure to make things happen quickly, to resolve uncertainty as soon as possible. Now there is a gradual movement toward a different rhythm. It is not passive, but it is less forceful. The need to control every outcome begins to soften, and in its place, there is a growing trust in the unfolding process, even when the full picture is not yet visible. This does not eliminate uncertainty, but it changes your relationship with it. Your attention also becomes more selective. What once captured your focus without question may now feel irrelevant or draining. Conversations that revolve around repetition, negativity, or superficial validation begin to lose their appeal. At the same time, there is a deeper appreciation for clarity, for honesty, and for interactions that carry a sense of presence. This shift in attention is not random. It reflects a reorganization of what your system considers meaningful and aligned. There is also a refinement in your emotional boundaries. Situations that previously would have pulled you into reaction now create a moment of pause. In that pause, there is space to perceive more than just the surface of what is happening. You begin to sense underlying patterns, not only in others but in yourself. This awareness does not always lead to immediate resolution, but it changes the way you engage. You are less likely to be absorbed into cycles that once felt unavoidable. At times, this can create a sense of distance from people or environments that you once felt deeply connected to. This distance is not necessarily about rejection or separation, but about resonance. As your internal state changes, the level at which you connect with certain dynamics also shifts. What once felt natural may now feel misaligned, not because it is inherently wrong, but because it no longer matches the frequency you are beginning to embody. There is also a growing sensitivity to what you expose yourself to. Information, environments, and even subtle emotional tones become more noticeable. This sensitivity is not a weakness. It is an increased awareness of how external input interacts with your internal state. It allows you to perceive the impact of things that previously went unnoticed, creating a more refined relationship with your surroundings. The concept of progress also begins to transform. It is no longer measured solely by external achievements or visible milestones. Instead, it is recognized in moments of internal coherence, in the ability to remain present in situations that once triggered automatic reactions, in the clarity that emerges when you are no longer driven by unconscious patterns. These shifts may not always be visible to others, but they represent a deeper form of movement. There is a natural patience that develops alongside this awareness. Not a passive waiting, but a grounded understanding that not everything needs to happen immediately to be real. The process of change becomes less about forcing outcomes and more about allowing alignment to take shape. This patience does not slow progress. In many ways, it accelerates it, because it reduces the internal resistance that once created tension and delay, and gradually, almost without noticing, your life begins to reflect this internal transformation. Not in dramatic overnight changes, but in subtle adjustments that accumulate over time. The way you choose, the way you respond, the way you interpret experiences, all begin to align with a different internal standard. This alignment does not guarantee a life without challenges, but it changes how those challenges are experienced and navigated. What once felt chaotic begins to reveal a structure. What once felt uncertain begins to carry a sense of direction. And what once felt disconnected begins to form a coherent pattern. This is how the activation continues to express itself, not as a single moment, but as an ongoing reorganization of your relationship with yourself, with your environment, and with the unfolding of your own life. There comes a point where everything you have been feeling begins to make a different kind of sense, not because all the answers suddenly appear, but because you no longer need them in the same way. What once felt like confusion starts to reveal itself as transition. What once felt like loss begins to look more like release, and what once felt like being stuck slowly transforms into the realization that something within you was being reorganized all along. This is the nature of a true internal shift. It does not always provide immediate clarity, but it changes the way you relate to uncertainty. You begin to see that the discomfort you experienced was not a sign that you were moving in the wrong direction, but a sign that you were no longer willing to remain where you once were. The old identity, built from repetition and familiarity, begins to loosen its hold, creating space for something more aligned, more conscious, and more intentional to take its place. Napoleon Hill once suggested that every transformation begins with a reorganization of thought before it becomes visible in reality. In a similar way, Neville Goddard emphasized that the state you consistently embody internally will eventually express itself externally. What you are experiencing now may be that exact reorganization in motion, a shift that begins quietly but carries the potential to reshape everything. So if there has been a sense that something is changing, even without clear evidence, trust that perception. You are not stepping away from your path. You are stepping into a version of it that requires a different level of awareness. And even if it does not feel stable yet, it is already real. If something inside you recognizes this message, then ask yourself honestly, what part of your old self are you finally ready to leave behind, even if you cannot yet see who you are becoming? If this resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and stay connected to this journey of deeper awareness and transformation. And if you feel that something within you is still unfolding, continue watching the next video on the screen, because this process does not end here. It is only beginning.